everyone, Joe here from ActionX. Welcome to What's on the Tube, or welcome back if this is your sixth Under the Banner of Heaven episode review. The penultimate episode's finally here. I apologize if this episode review took a little bit longer than normal to produce. I was hit with many life stuff. I had some social obligations to fill, let's say, and I couldn't really push them around anymore, so I just opted to leave it as is. Hell, I even sacrificed binging Stranger Things Season 4 for this, which, again, I do like reviewing the show. It's just that this weekend is, oh man, you have Top Gun Maverick, you have Bob's Burgers movie, you have Obi-Wan Kenobi, Stranger Things 4, and also always Under the Banner of Heaven, as well as a ton of other shows that are coming out, like iCarly and such. So it is pretty much one of the biggest content-filled weekends yet. And again, it's Memorial Day weekend, so a lot of people have that extra Monday off to enjoy the extra binge. So it's a lot to consume, let's say. But for me, I'm always up for the challenge. I always am. I have a lot to still watch. But however, I made time for this because it's the penultimate episode. We're starting to wrap to a close. But after this episode, I kind of been questioning, how are you going to wrap it up? Like, I'm pretty sure they will. They'll land the ship right. But there's just so many things that I want to see happen that I'm not sure the timeline will allow. And again, this is not meant to do a season 2. So there is no to be continued. No, this story is going to end next week, no matter what happens. And that's what concerns me a little bit, because I want them to have a great finish. But I feel like I'm going to lose something, or I'm not going to get everything I want to see out of this final episode, because I'm just so intrigued in the story, but we haven't gotten to certain moments yet. And I feel like the checkerboard is set for the big finish, for like, just for you to like get a bang for bang moment. But we'll see how that occurs. We'll see. But but overall with this episode, I still enjoyed it, besides all those like worriness about what next week has to offer. In terms of this week, this was a very much of like, we are putting the pieces in place for the end. Like we're setting up the motives, we're catching up with present day stuff. So now it's time for the last push. There's still a lot of things. I'm expecting some big things next week, a very big ending, but for this week, this very much was leading you in that something's going to happen next week for the end, and it's not all good. Let's just say that. But let's go for the Butcher recap and talk about this week's episode of Always. I don't know why I keep saying Always. I think never mind. Under the Banner of Heaven. So we begin with, where do we begin? Yeah, we pick up where we left out last week. They're in the house. They're still exploring every little bit of evidence to try and see where the Laffertys are currently. All they know is that, yes, there were people here. There's some open peaches jars, presumably from their doomsday shelter pantry. So they were here, but they obviously left probably when the cops got wind that they were on the way. So they're long gone. However, we're getting a little bit more into Ron's psyche, as his mom is still there for some reason. But yeah, so she's there, and she's still being very much defensive that, that the guy from last week, the big dude, is basically accusing her sons of doing these horrendous things, that, that his credibility isn't really meant to be believed. And of course, he's having a little bit of a dance here, because he knows the detectives know everything about him already, but she doesn't want his wife to know everything, so she doesn't leave him once this is all over. So he's still playing that fine line, but it's a very delicate dance, so to speak. So I think we head downstairs, and they talk about like more about Ron, and like what did Ron do after his wife and children left him, which, to be honest with you, it was a bit of a wreck. It was a bit of a wreck for him. He was struggling to figure out where his purpose was, that his newfound beliefs are not aligning with what he wanted always, which was a family, a home life, that's all he wanted in life, and he lost all of it. So what does he do next? He's not going to give them up. He wants to get them back, but how does he prove to them that he's ready to like be that person again? So he keeps looking around, and he finds this brother, this other leader in, I believe they said it was Oregon or Canada. I'm vague on the point, but he travels a long way. He finds this community of a certain branch of the I forgot the name of it, Damn it. Yeah, it's been so long because there's been so much content for him that I really forgot what the name of the fundamentalists, the fundamentalists, and that is accepting what Ron is currently believing, which is, of course, the polygamy and just the anti-taxing, like allowing him to follow what the original Mormons were following before we kind of got into the modern day tropes of it. And he's happy that he's around people that aren't his family, for ones, that actually do believe in this thing, and that they're accepting him, and then they're welcoming him with open arms. Even the leader kind of like fully baptized him in a way into what their beliefs are, by, I guess, doing their own like bathing in the water type thing, and also kissing him. Like, I don't know how that works, but to each their own. So Rod is kind of reinvigorated. He has this newfound sense of direction. So now he knows what he thinks he has to be able to do in order to get his wife and kids back. So he returns home first to Dan and the others. So he's been away for a little bit. So they kind of are moving on to a new direction for getting their message out there. So they partnered with Osiris, which we mentioned last week, the big dude with the very curly beard, who is a salesman by trade, but he's very much of a leadership voice in the fundamentalist side, that he's kind of recruited the LaFrays and some of their other friends and family to kind of start spreading the word out there, that things need to change, and then there has to be this new order. Ron is at first initially against it because I think what he learned when he was away isn't exactly aligning with Osiris's beliefs, but since his brothers are kind of more aligned with him, he kind of has no choice but to bend over a little bit, since, now he's back home. Things are different now. He can't really do what he has to do. Plus, he still needs to get his family back at some point, so he bends over a little bit. Also, for some weird reason, before we go any further, I remember there was a flashback with one of the LaFray, well, the father LaFray, killing a dog, which I'm like, are you serious? Like, of all the things that I was expecting to see in this week's episode, I was not expecting there to be. Now, thankfully, we didn't get to see it. It was just to imply, it was a punishment by the dad to, like, teach his children a lesson, which I'm like, dude, no. That is clearly a big no-no. But, that's my belief, that's how I believe it. I want to say we eventually head up to I was like, do we head back to a drive, or like, I don't know, we hit to that night, because I know there's a point where Brenda and Alan are back in the story in terms of the flashbacks, because now we kind of set up the LaFray side of thing, because the last piece of flashback for those LaFrays, because we got so heavy on them in the last couple of weeks, is that there was a vote, and Osiris was like pitching it. I'm not entirely sure if that vote was to kill Brenda and her child, or it was founding the list, or it was also just making sure that what we're about to do next is going to seem extreme to a lot of people, but this is necessary in order for them to be able to go into heaven. We're saving them by killing them, if that makes sense. I'm not entirely sure what the vote was for. I know Ron was very much the outlier vote, that no matter what, they were going to do it, but Ron, I think, was the only one who did not agree with what they were about to do, so pretty sure that sets up the theme of it. Also, it's funny that Dan was kind of like neutral this episode. Like, he was very much quiet, very much kind of sane-ish, if that's the right word for it. He seems sane-ish, which was kind of weird for me to see. It was kind of like, for once, he was getting ordered around, so that was kind of weird. Which, again, it makes it a little bit more scary to what next week's episodes might bring. So they leave it on that. I know that Jeb and his partner, I think they get filled on another story. No, not yet. So I think by that time point in the night, or if it's the next day. Oh, no, we're not there yet. That's the next morning. I forgot about that. But eventually, at some point, they head back home, and Jeb talks to a couple of people in the LSC community that were close with Brenda, or I'm not sure if that was Brenda's sister and her husband. I'm not entirely sure who they were exactly, but they were in touch during Brenda's final months of living. They can kind of paint a picture to what Brenda was thinking and what she was doing leading up to the events of her death. Because a lot of stuff happened. None of we're switching back over, because remember, Brenda was doing everything she can to save Alan from whatever his brothers were planning, and as well as trying to to stop the LaFray somehow from going down a darker path. So he was doing everything she can to pull out the wives, pull out the children, just leave the men alone, and maybe hopefully having a chance to kind of reawaken them to kind of go back to where things were before all this crazy shit happened. I remember at some point, I don't know what came first, because there's a lot per se in this episode with Brenda, because we haven't seen much of them in the last couple of weeks, so we kind of have to catch up on them. I know after they moved into their house, I think that's when Alan started becoming more distant, started becoming more focused on what his brothers needed. So he was kind of feeling a little out of touch with his family. And I don't know what the order was, but I remember he comes home one day, his daughter's sick, and he had a long day, so he didn't want to hear anyone's voice. So he told Brendan to shut up because he needs a moment to like relax a little bit before he can, get back to the stresses of home life. But Brenda's like, no, your daughter's in pain. We need to go to a doctor right now to get some help. And he's like, no, and he gets mad and he slaps Brenda, and that's of course enough for Brenda. Like, you know what? I need to go. I need to leave. Goodbye. But she comes back later to kind of pick up some things to take her daughter to the doctor to get treated. Alan is being watched by, I guess, I want to say this is the brother of Brenda's sister. I want to say that. I think that's most likely the case. And they both have their individual conversations with each other's of the same gender. I know Brenda talks with the woman. I'm not sure, that's pretty much her sister, saying that she's having enough, that the Lafrays, his brothers, are corrupting him more and more every week, and then eventually it might come to the point where she just needs to get away. She needs to back out, because at the end of the day, her being a mother triumphs her being a wife, but her sister / this woman is telling her, I'm not sure, like, you really want to get this approved with the church before you do anything, because again, I understand your point, but at the end of the day, like, the Lord will provide us with the answers we need. So if he says divorce, get divorced, or at least get help from the people who are in charge of the church. So basically, it's their version of marriage counseling, except by religious sense. So they hit one up, and Brenda's expressing her also, yeah, I forgot to mention, Alan had a conversation with the husband of the woman, who was very much trying to like get him to come back a little bit, like reel him in back a little bit from the actions of his brothers, what they're doing to them. It makes a little bit of a crack, but I don't think it really works, because when we get to the marriage counseling session, Brenda's just expressing her dismay and her worries for her husband, and the type of emotional damage and what his brothers might do to him if he doesn't listen to them. And at the end of the day, she's just focused on trying to get her husband back so he can be a father, so they can be a family again. Sadly, Alan does not really reciprocate those feelings that much, as he's morally focused on what exactly are the bishops saying in terms of like the argument to like turn Alan back. He was mainly just, opening up their hole, saying that, well, what about this? What about that? Like resuming the fundamentalist talk that his brother's been kind of peering in his head for a while. Eventually he says, I'm not doing this. This isn't the solution. I'm going to leave. So he's about to leave with Brenda, but Brenda stays put. She does not want to leave unless Alan gets help, but Alan doesn't want to get help. So he decides to just leave. And for Brenda, that kind of is for her like an abandonment of their marriage, since he didn't even want to trying to fix them. So she begs with the bishops to kind of grant her a divorce so that she can spiritually move away from Alan and the Lafray, so that she has a better chance. The bishops don't believe it like that. I guess they don't really believe in divorce, to be honest with you. So instead, they're giving her the power to kind of control the Lafrays, like decide their destiny, like, which I don't know how that works, to be honest with you. Again, it's not my religion, it's not my culture, it's not my say. I'm just saying, like, I don't know how that power would influence them, but in this case, like, they all put their hands on her head, supposedly giving her the power to guide what the Lafrays do next, in a matter of speaking. So as a result, she decides to again start trying to not break apart the Lafray, but trying to get the men who are the most corrupt, let's say, in her side of the story, to try and revert back if they see them losing their wife and children. Similar to how Ron was reacting, but Ron, of course, obviously had an avert reaction to it, not the reaction that we were expecting to get. So that's what she was hoping to try and get them all away from it. But I believe eventually Dan catches on to this, and Dan's wife goes to kind of verbally threaten her that if she doesn't stop, she's going to get blood atone, i.e. she's going to die, as a matter of speaking. And that eventually, shortly after, Ron's wife and her say goodbye as she and the kids are basically moving away somewhere far away, so that they're away from Ron. And only Brenda supposedly knew where they were going. No one else knew. So now the prevailing theory is that they caught wind that Brenda might know where she is, and since she's on the list, they have to go find her. So who's the only person who knows the address? Brenda. So they probably did what they had to do with her, but before she sadly passed on, she probably had to give up the information on where they were located right now, which is probably where they're heading right now, which is why they're not like at least Ron and Dan are not around right now. So they're trying to look for them. I know also going on with Jeb's household, I know Jeb's kind of feeling a bit off. Like you can tell in his mental state that this is already not the Jeb we saw in episode 1. He definitely is being rattled by this case and the fact that, you know, he's starting to listen to, and again, he's not doing it because he wants to, he has to do it because there is that sense of, you know, well, not a sense of, he has a job to do. He has to solve the case. So he has to listen to everything, including listening to this fundamentalist Mormon side of things. And it started to influence him a little bit that, you know, that there is another voice talking in his head. Like for all his life, he's always stuck to believing in the Lord, believing in his religion, and kind of that letting that be his through line in his life. Now he's gotten to the point where he has to listen to like this outside saying, and it's starting to affect him. He's not being 100%. So when he is talking to his partner the next day about their battle strategy, because they have a lot to do, they have a lot of angles to explore. And since this is probably the biggest time period of their police department's history, there's only so much men that can go around to like allocate the resources needed. But during this conversation, he mentions that when he tried to bless his mother in order to, pray for his mother so that he can give her a rinse of her hair from the shampoo because she needs to be bathe apparently. He fakes a blessing, which he never has done before, and you know he didn't really mean it. He only just did it because he didn't have the energy to really deal with his mother that night. So, and it's starting to affect him that he's starting to do these certain things that he never would have done before had he not started on this case. So they split off. I know Jeb returns back to the station to kind of still follow up the letters and talking to Alan, see if they can find out anything more information about where the LaFrays might be, while Jeff's partner goes up to find Osiris in the mountains. So, and there's also was a 7-Eleven robber that might be connected. So there's just so many angles right then they have to deal with. So it's all over the place. And that's why I mentioned before with all the flashbacks I mentioned already that this is where Jeb reads the letters that Brenda was sending to this woman, and this is where he starting to figure out like what Brenda was doing in her last months of her death, before her death. Eventually, he shows Alan the letters, and he gets another round of remorsefulness because again, him rereading the part where he basically left his wife in the middle of the church, not wanting to like fix their marriage. He admits he made a big mistake. He just knew at the time he just did not want to deal with it. So he just spent doing anything else and didn't want to come home to his family to have dinner, to spend time with them. And then eventually I think he had a sense of like, yeah, he lost them in an emotional sense because he just never really bothered to come back because he just didn't want to deal with the reality of having to choose between the woman he loves and his family. Now, for me, being mine, again, this was a very, everyone is different type of ordeal. So me believing it, my family's always first. When in terms of like before you get married, your family, like your biological family, your mom, your dad, your sibling, even your friends that you consider family, they're first in life. The moment you get married and the moment you start having kids and these additional responsibilities, those become your new family. So your other members, they're still considered family, by the titlement of it. But in terms of like your priorities, your priority number one should be your wife, your kids, your partner, any responsibility you share together. That has to be the first priority, no matter what, above all else. Once you get married and have that verbal agreement that, yeah, we're together for the long haul, it's that point where like you have to admit that, yeah, that this is the way and that I have to focus on them. But Alan did not focus on that, and he's filled with remorse that he never got a chance to like go back and fix it before Brenda and his own daughter died, and he's feeling more guilt by it. And he tells Alan that, hey, I know like at this point I'm cleared as a suspect, but is it possible I could just stay at the jail? I don't want to go out there because right now I would be filled with ridicule, being stuck in an empty house with the memories of my deceased family, as well as people out there would probably judge him for what he's doing so far from what the information is available. And that Alan's the only one that's really kind of looking at him with like a neutral lens. Like he doesn't like him, but he doesn't hate him. He's just doing his job. And that's all what Alan needs right now. Jeb being a nice dude allows him to, because, no harm, no foul anyway. I want to say, yeah. Also, I thought it was kind of a Dixie because I think after the next flashback we get, Jeb goes back into the cell I thought he was gonna tell Jeb to get the fuck out for some reason. I don't know why. That was just kind of like the mindset I had. But it was just him verifying if like if there was a chance if Ron was to let Diane, his wife, go after everything that he'd done to her and her leaving basically the state, is there a chance Ron could just let her go away scot free? And Alan's like, most likely not. Ron really wanted his wife back, so he would be the most determined out of everyone to go find his wife again and see if they can repair things. So that's another issue. So most likely they have the information. They're heading out there, wherever the hell that might be. And remember, we still have Dan's missing stepdaughters to think about too. So it's like, where the hell are they too? Like, there's a lot of missing LaFreys out there, which is another thing I'm worried about. Like, is next week going to be able to cover everything? Like, even if it's just an hour, like a full hour, like, are you going to be able to cover everything in like a nice, respectful way? That's kind of like the big question here, and I really don't even know if they're able to. But again, we'll see what happens next week. But back over to the plot. I want to say, I think, yeah, eventually a certain point, Jeb returns home to continue working from home on the letters, and he's just, the more and more he reads, the more and more of this, let's say, outside writings he's reading, it's still affecting him a lot, and he's still starting to struggle to really believe in LSD and believing the Mormonism. That his wife enters the car and they try to pray, but Jeb cries after she leaves because I'm pretty sure what he was saying and the prayer he did wasn't genuine. And again, it's the second time he did that to a family member, and he's starting to get he's starting to get hurt because he's never been in this situation before. This is all new to him, and he's feeling like he's betraying what he's grown up to do all of his life. And I can imagine that, yeah, because for me, I'm not a religious person. Like I'm a Catholic. I've been confirmed and everything, but I don't go that often to the gym, to the church. So if something happens to me right now, I wouldn't feel remorseful. I would feel something, but Jeb, he spent his entire life, as well as prepping his own daughters for this life. And the fact that right now he's starting to like branch away from it in a different sort of way is definitely getting to him, and he's not happy about it. He doesn't like it, the fact that he's doing this. I know eventually, yeah, that also Jeb's partner eventually reaches the mountain. He meets Osiris, who Osiris looks like a really scary motherfucker. Like, if you don't have any weapons or backup of your own, I would be back in that car, getting the frack away, because I do not trust this man whatsoever, especially because he's holding, I think, a hammer or an axe in his hand. So I'm like, this guy seems like, let's just say he's crazy. He looks crazy, and he's definitely a person you do not want to be around. And I believe the episode sadly ends because, again, there's this. Oh yeah, I forgot. So they go back to this. I forgot. The last thing I forgot to mention is that so Jeb joins along on the 7-Eleven call, and they find a person that does look like one of the LaFreys. I think that's the younger brother, the one that's emotionally disturbed a little bit. I think that's the one they were looking at. He's just. I think that's it. Again. Besides Ron, Dan, and Alan, I really don't know anyone else's name. I really don't. So it could be him. It could not be him. Maybe it's another brother I don't even know about. Who knows? So now at least one more LaFrey is nearby, back in town. So that's a positive. Which is another thing. Like, I really don't know how they're gonna wrap everything up. If this was an 8-episode season, I wouldn't mind. We'll have 2 episodes still to wrap up the plot, but next week's the end. Like, I'm really concerned. And also that was it for this week's episode. But the thing is, I'm really concerned how next week's finale is going to go because there's so much to do. And it's not that I don't believe they can land the ship correctly and get everything like a full closure and we kind of move on with it. I'm not saying that at all, but it just feels like that there's just too much right now that even I'm questioning how are we going to wrap this up? Like, how is all these subplots and main plot points going to be figured out? How? I really don't know. If they suddenly announce we're doing an 8-episode, I'm like, perfect, that's fine. At this point, I don't believe it. I think, yeah, next week is the series finale, and then we're gonna figure out what happens next. But yeah, but so for now, for this week's episode, besides my worriedness for next week's finale, I still enjoy this week. We're definitely slowly getting the pieces ready for a very big confrontation with both the present day stuff and the flashback stuff. I do believe next week is the week where we get that specific flashback with Brenda and the child. I really hope they don't do it, but I'm pretty sure by this point they're going to have to. And that's what I'm scared about. Next week's episode is about to be a little traumatic in my opinion. So we'll see what happens there. again, there's a lot going on. Like, I'm really curious to see how this is all going to wrap up. Who really was the one who pulled the trigger against Brenda? Like, there's a lot to come next week, and I'm very much legitimately, I'm excited, but I'm also concerned. And that's what this episode brought. Like, if this episode spent maybe like a little, had an extra 10 minutes to get more stuff in, I would have been appreciative of it. But since next week's kind of like that big question mark, we're going to see how that goes. We're going to see how that goes. But that will be next week. But for this week, I enjoyed it a lot. It's another episode that's continuing the storyline through and through. The mystery is developing to a fever pitch. I'm really curious to see how Jeb is going to be at the very end of this. Once this entire case is over, what does that leave for him next in terms of his beliefs and everything? Because there ain't no way he's going back to where he was so far. There's no way. He's already not corrupted, but he's experienced so much that it's kind of hard to go back. But we'll find that all out very soon next week. But for this week, 2 thumbs up. I enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what did you think of this week's episode of Under the Banner of Heaven. Let's talk about it down below. And I believe that's going to do it for me today, everyone. So if you're unaware, this has been What's the Two from ActionX, reviewing every episode in Under the Banner of Heaven, brought to you by Hulu and FX. If you want to see more of us, please subscribe to us on youtube.com/ActionXvideo for more shows in the world of What's in the Tube, which includes our Walker episode reviews and our rookie episode reviews each and every week. Next week is our Tom Swift episode review. Yeah, baby, the Druniverse is expanding. We're returning back to a familiar environment. Next week's a bit loaded. It's going to have 4 reviews. So next week we're going to have, well, tomorrow, because it's sadly going on Sunday. Technically now 5 reviews you're getting this week. Actually, no, you my bad. It's 4. Or is it 5? Whatever the case might be. So this week you have the rookie season 4 review, which will be wrapping up our rookie run for the year. Then the day after that, you have the Tom Swift series premiere episode review on Wednesday. And then you have Under the Banner of Heaven, the series finale review on Friday. And then you have Walker back for its final run of episodes for the season, coming back this Thursday, but we will be reviewing that on Saturday. So there's a lot to come, a lot to review, so stay tuned for all that. It's going to be a big old week for What's in the Tube, and of course, there should be a Save the Channel, sorry about that, very soon, because there's a lot to coming out for What's in the Tube coming this fall, so we got some words to talk about that, but that'll be next time. Don't worry about that, because again, if you only care about Under the Banner of Heaven, you're in luck. Next week is the season finale, the series finale review, the finale review, so check it out then. And then the week after that, we'll be doing a definitive series review, talk about all 7 episodes in spoiler-filled territory. That's going to kind of wrap up our run here in this little small corner of our universe that we finally wrapped up. It's nice to put everything with a nice bow. It's nice. It's nice to do that. But again, if you like this review, please like, favorite, share if you want to. Please also ring the bell for notification when our next review is live. And please also follow us on social media. But until we see each other again, for all you banners out there, I'll see you all next week for the finale review. But until then, stay safe out there, be good to each other, and as always, peace out.